All right, thank you, May. Hello, everyone. Today I'm not going to be sharing a research project, as I know some of the other speakers have, although this is really stuff that I would love to research in future. But the focus today is really more just on sharing the journey that I've been on with some of my colleagues in the School of Accountancy, specifically over the last couple of years, with changes we made to try and really enhance student success ultimately. So as May mentioned, I recently completed my PG dip with her, so it's really nice to have a familiar face on the other side of the screen. And it was really an amazing opportunity to engage with colleagues, not only in our school, but also from various disciplines. I always think that we live in such a bubble, so it was really an amazing opportunity to just share and hear from other people. The modules that we completed certainly shaped my approach as an educator, also helping us explore ways to enhance our roles as lecturers. On the other hand, they also reinforced that many of the changes that we had already implemented at that point, that was really born out of a passion for our students, were on the right track. And it was actually supported by research, although that's not necessarily the route that we followed, but that was also very encouraging. I believe that there's always room for improvement. So what I'm going to share today isn't like the final reveal of something that happened. But I've also seen firsthand that even these small changes can lead to significant progress, and not just for our students, but also for us as lecturers. So with that in mind, I'm really excited to just share of some of that journey that we've been on with you all today. So maybe just for a little bit of context first. I'm a lecturer in the School of Accountancy, and my field of experience and expertise is management, accounting, and finance, specifically my discipline. And I lecture at a third-year level. So the class consists of around 750 to 800 students every year. So we do deal with very large numbers. And most of my students are pursuing the BXI degree. And that's with the goal of ultimately becoming a chartered accountant. So if you've been in Breakaway through 3 today, you would have heard a lot of discussions from the accountants, which is also really interesting, and you'll see how some of it fits in with what everyone else is also doing. And the big thing with our school is that we have this relationship with PSYCO, which is where our school's accreditation is. And that means that as lecturers, we can't just focus on teaching students content, because we have this responsibility to help students prepare for their PSYCO board exams, which will happen after their degrees. And that is their ultimate test of competence. So this is heavily influencing how we design our assessments. And I know that often leaves us feeling a little bit, leaves us with very little flexibility in terms of the formats we can use and things like that, because what PSYCO dictates at a board exam level is what we normally follow at a school level, because that's a big part of the preparation that we're helping them with. So although this can be frustrating, as it limits our ability to innovate and tailor our assessments to better suit our students' learning needs, and that has left us with everything else that we can hopefully help students with. So for my subject specifically, Management, Accounting and Finance 3, our subject is the structure for assessment is predominantly summative. And with that, 90% of our students' final marks come from written closed book tests and assessments. This means that if a student struggles with writing an actual assessment, their chances of passing the year is really diminished. Regardless of how hard they study, regardless of how well they understand content, if they battle with the writing of an assessment, they essentially cannot pass the year. So because I'm involved with third-year students, by the time the students reach their third year, we find that they're very comfortable studying. They know how to study. They've been studying for 2 years. They think what they're doing is going to prepare them for their third year as well. And then yet often we find that they struggle to get the marks that they've gotten in the first 2 years, even though they still put in a lot of effort. So this raised an important question for us. So it left us with the question of how do we assist students to prepare them for writing the actual tests and passing these assessments beyond just the content that we teach? How do they successfully demonstrate their understanding, in other words, in these assessments? So to address this, we focused on 2 key areas. First one being exam technique and stress management, and the second one then looking at closing the knowledge expectation gap. So when we talk about exam technique and stress management, I'm sure that many of you have seen that how just a lack of exam technique and poor stress management can prevent students from achieving the marks that they are capable of. I remember in one of our PG Dip lectures, we were discussing assessments across various disciplines, and I shared that our students really battle with anxiety and stress and things like that. At a third year level in our school, for example, it's really not strange to have a student have a panic attack during one of our assessments. At some point, we were like, how did it go today? Did you have any panic attacks? And that's really concerning, considering that that's something that we've gotten used to almost. I've also, in one of our assessments, I received, so out of my class of around 750 students, after one particular assessment, I received 151 excused applications. And the majority of those students doctors cited anxiety, panic attacks, tension, headaches, things like that as the medical condition for why these students couldn't come and write the assessment. And I was really surprised that none of the other disciplines in our PG Dip class, and I mean, we were surrounded by a variety of disciplines, experienced that at the same level that we did. So I know our degree is hard, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily harder than a degree in mathematics, for example. It's just that it seemed to have been an issue that we were dealing with at a level different to the other disciplines. And maybe just for a little bit of context, one of the big things that makes our degree different at a third year level is that our students have 4 major subjects instead of just 2 majors that are required for your BCom General, BCom Accounting degree, for example. And what we find is that this leads to students, it just adds on to their load. So we find that students are often juggling their time and their energy between the 4 subjects. And normally they just focus on the one that's at the bottom of their list. So we find that the students go on this almost a roller coaster ride. If in test 1 they perform well in my subject, that means I can almost guarantee that by the June exam, they won't be performing so well because I wasn't the one at the top of their priority list, if that makes sense. And it keeps going like that throughout the year. The problem being they still need to pass all 4 of those majors in order to get entry into the 4th year CTA program, which is what they need to do in order to get to their psycho board exams. So it really is a full plate that they have to deal with, which adds to this load that leads to the anxiety that they are feeling. So to deal with this, what we've tried to do is we've made a big adjustment to our tutorial system. So most of the questions that students deal with in their touch sessions are from our past papers, and students are encouraged to practice and bring these questions and their queries and issues that they found to the smaller sessions. Because we have such large lecture venues, we focus a lot on what we can do during the tutorial sessions, which are the smaller groups. Not small enough. In an ideal world, we'd like them to be even smaller, but around 30 to 50 students, which is a lot more manageable. We also then, during these tutorial sessions, work through one unseen question. And an unseen question is essentially just a question for which they do not have a solution available. They haven't seen it before, so it simulates an attempt of a question as you would in an assessment. But it allows students to actually attempt that challenging problem while there is support available. So you've got your tutor, you've got friends, you could ask for help if you need it in that case. Additionally, we try to end each lecture by working through at least one assessment level question. Of course, that's time permitting. If we don't have time, we still like to focus a little bit on if this was a question you were faced with, how would you deal with it, that type of thing. But ideally, we would spend less time on just running through content because we now know that at a third year level, our students can do that by themselves. But we can show them in a lecture by working through an exam assessment level question that they can, how they should tackle that and things like that. This has helped our students develop problem-solving skills, and at the end of the day, it also builds their confidence so that they can remain calm and focused during their assessments. So practicing under these assessment conditions, essentially meaning you're alone, you don't have any support, you don't look at your textbook, your notes, or the suggested solution, and that's what's necessary for them to prepare for writing their assessments. It also simulates time pressure, which is a big problem for many of our students, getting through the actual assessment at a pace that they need to finish it, which is crucial for them being successful. So all of that being said, and all of the things we have implemented, I really believe this is still an area we need to focus on. And especially now after the previous discussion with Prof. Mays and just all of the emotions that go with it, I think it's a very big area that we need to keep in mind when dealing with students and seeing them as whole beings and as human when they're dealing with these issues. which then brings me to the second area of focus that we've been looking at, and that's the knowledge expectation gap. So after an assessment is written, we often find that our students are slightly confused about why they get the marks that they get. And it's like they write a paper thinking they've prepared, and only when they get their marks, they realize, oh, I didn't really understand, or I really didn't focus enough on this part, or I didn't read it carefully, or all of those kinds of things. And that for us indicates that there's a gap between what they think they know and what they actually know. And we need to help them address that gap even before they get into the assessment venue. So when we consider this environment for which higher education is intended to prepare our students for, which is also the world of work beyond the university, we recognize the importance of equipping them with skills to actively engage in their learning and to navigate the challenges that they will encounter. So the goal isn't just to pass the assessment, although that's what students think, but also to delve into the well-rounded individual who can thrive in their future careers. And it's very difficult sometimes to get students to focus on that long-term plan. We often have students that would not come to lectures in 1 week because they're studying for something that's happening next week, although the lecture content they're missing, they'll have to catch up anyway. That type of juggle, as I mentioned earlier. So research has shown that one of the most critical skills a student can develop is assessment literacy. And I must thank my PG DIP course for this, because all of this I had no language for these things, and all of it makes a lot more sense to me now. Although we experienced it in real life, it wasn't, we didn't really understand the words that were being used. So particularly the ability of students to make informed judgments about the quality of the work that they do. So this underscores the importance of self-awareness and self-reflection, which are essential for long-term success. And as lecturers, it's our job to help students cultivate these skills. And to this end, we've introduced two specific things. The first one being formative assessments, and then we've also improved our feedback practices. So firstly, if we look at formative assessments, sorry, let me just get back. The formative assessments, which are used throughout the year to monitor and support our students' progress, can help close the knowledge expectation gap, which is what we hope anyway. So in my course specifically, we've only recently incorporated the formative assessments into our grading structure, although we've always tried to do things, but most students, if it's not 4 marks, they don't take it seriously. So we have recently included it into our grading structure. And we believe that that can foster a sense of personal control over their learning. So once every block in each of the 4 modules that they do, they have an opportunity to write a formative assessment. And students who engage with these formative assessments may then develop a skill to monitor, critically assess, and also correct their own work, which is vital for their development. So we're hoping that in those sessions, they will realize what they don't know yet before the stakes are as high as they are in our summative assessments. This links to our feedback, how we've improved our feedback system a little bit. So effective feedback can significantly enhance the student's ability to self-reflect and self-regulate their learning. So according to a model by Hattie and Timperley, self-regulation is particularly impactful, and the type of feedback can boost student self-efficacy and help them better understand how to improve their performance. And again, we would want this to happen before they get into the formal assessments, so that at that point they're not dealing with the same uncertainty anymore. Carlos and Boud also highlights the importance of feedback literacy, emphasizing that students need to develop the skills to interpret and apply the feedback that they receive. So historically, we all just released markers comments and things like that to the broader student population after an assessment. Because we have such large student numbers, it's very difficult to focus on individual feedback. But we realized quickly that students don't engage with the feedback that they get that way. So one way we're addressing this is by linking it to our formative assessments. And we do that through peer evaluation. So in other words, students have the opportunity to write a written assessment during one of their tutorials, and they then swap with a friend, and we work through a solution with them in order to show them how to award marks. So on the one hand, they get to assess a friend's work, but they also have to go through a self-reflection exercise in the same process, because once they hand the marking back, they need to have a discussion, and you need to be able to explain why you awarded a mark or why not. which means students need to form an opinion. They need to commit to an answer. They need to commit that this is what I said and I believe this is worth a mark. And we've really found that very beneficial. Even in the larger groups, students that take it seriously are really getting the benefit of that. So initially, we did have a little bit of students not trusting feedback they got from their peers. Like, how's my friend supposed to give me a mark? They don't know what they're doing, type thing. But the process has encouraged them to develop the judgment skills that we think they need and also to reflect on their own work. So if you have to be able to provide feedback to your friend and you think your feedback is valuable, you need to trust that the feedback that they are providing is also relevant and valuable to you. So like I said, this is, we've been doing it for about a year or so, but it's still something we've learning to improve over time. And we are hoping that this will eventually foster a culture of informed judgment and self-reflection within our courses, helping students to continually assess their progress and identify areas for improvement. Hopefully also teaching them how to mark from a marking plan and things like that if they are at home and they practice questions at home under assessment conditions, they are able to judge their own work and form an opinion about whether they are ready for the actual assessment. Finally, we've also introduced self-reflection quizzes after each of the assessments that prompt students with specific questions to evaluate and reflect not only on their attempt in that specific assessment, but it also questions how they will prepare going forward and if anything in their study approach needs to change. In these quizzes, we've also always asked students at the end of the quiz, how can we as lecturers assist you currently going forward? And it's been really a valuable tool for us to include in our own reflection practices. And it gives us timely feedback on whether there is particular things to change, how can we improve, where are our students at, and that type of thing. So in conclusion, our role as educators extend beyond simply imparting knowledge. So it's about equipping our students with the skills and mindset that they need to succeed, not only in their studies, but also in their future careers. So by enhancing exam technique, closing the knowledge expectation gap, and fostering assessment and feedback literacy, I really believe that we can help our students become more self-aware, self-regulated learners. The changes we've implemented are gradual, but they aim to create an environment where students take control of their learning journey, building confidence and resilience along the way. As we continue to refine our approaches, I am confident and hopeful that these small changes will lead to significant, lasting improvements in our students' academic and professional lives. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Wow. It was a very truly insightful presentations and enriching as well, because it's clearly, you can see how addressing exam techniques and also addressing the stress management and the knowledge gaps really have the profound impact on student success and your practical strategies. I mean, including self-reflections and allowing students to critically reflect and looking onto themselves and develop those kind of skills. And how can I, in some way, work with this kind of feedback? And usually students might not necessarily understand, okay, I'm getting this feedback, but how do I use this feedback to improve on my next assessment? That's truly really amazing. And I think those practical strategies really helps self-regulation, providing that continuous feedback are very, very valuable to foster that confidence we want in the students, and that you did for your students, and the resilient student at that. Thank you so much. I would like to open up to the floor and maybe perhaps ask any attendees or colleagues if they have questions for Sandra. Please, you're more than welcome to go ahead. Before we go to the chat part of it. Anybody? Zama, do we have any comments, any questions?
There was a comment on the chat with Leo said very interesting. I don't know if Leo would like to elaborate on that. And there's a hand up.
Yes.
Tamsin.
Please go ahead, Tamsin.
Thanks, May. Hi, nice to see you. Thanks, Sandra. That was very insightful. Always good to hear what's going on. Early on, you were speaking about how we don't have much say in how things are done due to being prescribed by psycha, how things should be done. Do you think it's possible to have any pushback against how psycha believes things should be done, or whether it's a futile exercise?
I would have to get the fourth year team involved, because they would say that we need to do what we need to do to get students to know the books before they get to fourth year. Ultimately, I think if we've got the research backing changes that we think should be implemented, I think it's a conversation worth having. I think there's a lot of research that says the sitting down in a big hall 29 setting for 3.5 hours trying to remember everything you did over the last 6 months, for example, is probably not the best way to judge whether a student can go and do a job once they get into the market. But I know at this point it's working within what we've got that we are trying to help the students.
Thanks. And sometimes trying to remember what they've done in the last 3 years as we assess from first year work until third year.
Yes, exactly.
I have a question, if no one else. So Sandra, you mentioned, the role of feedback in helping students, develop that evaluated judgment, the self-assessment, and also, now how do you balance the need for detailed feedback? When do educators can give detailed feedback to students? I mean, you said you have a large group of students, with the time constraints and often faced by educators. Perhaps you can share your insights to that.
Yes, my insights are I wish we could do more. I think it would always be nice to do more. But within the big group, we are doing a lot better than we did 3 or 5 or 10 years ago. We've also, small things like we're using Mentimeter now in a few classes throughout the block just to get feedback from students. And once we know what questions students have, and even just the question in the self-reflection that says, how can we help? Just by going through that and being able to go back to students the following week and say, these were the things you mentioned. This is how we are going to try and address some of that. It opens up the conversation so that there is a two-way stream. So students then do feel heard, they do feel understood to an extent. As far as feedback on a specific concept, for example, goes, we still do Marcus comments on assessments. We do detailed feedback when they have a formative assessment in the TUT class, when there's smaller groups. And like I said, I wish we could do more, but we are finding that is at least an improvement on students a few years ago sitting back and not having any idea of where they were at, what were they supposed to be doing, that type of thing. But if in an ideal world we could double the number of lecturers and we could have 10 students in a group and really go into detail, that would have been great. We obviously also have a very consultative approach within our school, so students after assessments can come and sit with you with their paper and say, I struggled with this part. So we do encourage, and that's a big part of what the self-reflection quizzes have encouraged students to do, is work through your script and then bring it and come and sit with a tutor you're comfortable with or a lecturer you're comfortable with, and we can work through it with you to identify what went wrong. Was it your understanding of content? Because at a third year level, we find that that's not the case. Students don't perform badly because they didn't study. They perform badly because when they read the required, they thought we were asking this and they answered that question, which wasn't the question. Or they missed an important thing in the scenario because they read over it too quickly. So it's things that we can help them with, not sending them back to their textbook going, but you didn't study, go and learn more. That's what we're finding is not the hurdle that they need to overcome at this level. Because at this, like I said, at this point, they know how to spend hours in front of their books. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gotten to this point. It's really just helping them when they then stumble in their third year, how can we help them prepare better so that at the end of the year, the mark they get is a reflection of their actual ability?
I mean, absolutely. What you said, it's it's inspiring. It's not just guiding the student, also mentoring them towards that and identifying, giving that space, offering that opportunity for them to say you can knock on the door and just come and consult. That's amazing. So we do have a question in the chat from Dr. Vizen, where he mentioned it does bother him that the way we assess can have such a profound impact on students' ability to demonstrate their competence. Assessment should be kind of value neutral and not be an intermediate variable in student success. So it's more like a comment and a question at the same time. Thank you so much. So I think we do have a question on the floor. Gary Marquise, please do go ahead.
Hi, Sandra. Firstly, thanks for the presentation. Really interesting to always hear, what's being done and so on. I just wanted to find out, and I apologize if I missed it, a lot of what you're doing, is it sort of a proactive measure where we're sort of doing this before sort of the semester kicks off, or is it a bit sort of as time goes by, after each assessment, this is sort of what we're doing in terms of feedback? I'm not sure sort of where it fits in with the process.
Yes, no, of course, no. So the feedback is more after assessments at the majority of our feedback. The formative assessments, however, is per block. So across the 3 of our 4 majors do formative assessments. So in other words, they get this. We follow the same approach in all of our subjects. So students get familiar with the approach, and the feedback they get there is on their current. It's their feedback while learning, not feedback after the assessment. So for that, it's really, and because the stakes are lower, I mean, it is 4 marks, but it's not going to be the thing that causes you to fail, like a summative assessment. We find that students engage with it at a different emotional level almost, because they're not as nervous about it, which means they're really attempted to see if they know what they're talking about. And then the feedback they get on that is really a true reflection of, you're not comfortable with this yet, you should go back to this. And because there's a social element to it in the discussion and the peer evaluation that they do, we find that students start talking about the content to develop their understanding instead of just reading it and writing it, which has also made a big difference. So that I would count as feedback proactively. It's cool. Before they get to the actual assessments. Yes.
Thanks, Sandra. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And we also have a comment from Tamsin, which mentioned a misunderstanding required of the question or missing specific indicators form part of the required critical thinking in an assessment. And perhaps the levels of anxiety and time constraints can be countering the critical thinking and cognitive challenges of assessments. Yeah. Oh, and we have Nanelle, please.
Hi, thanks, Sandra. I'm really good. And just one thing on the assessments that I just want to mention that we've seen in line with this bit of the discussion about the stress and anxiety, in which I think is making a difference, is SAICA has made some changes going forward as to the timing of the assessments and giving students a bit more time. And we've been doing it for the first time in the 4th year this year, our PGDA, and we're finding that it is definitely making a difference for the students who understand what's going on. We find that it doesn't help the students who still don't understand the concept. So I think it's a very positive move, and I'm glad that we are moving in that direction. And I think sometimes, do we really need to put people under such extreme time pressure? I think a lot of that comes from the profession, and you do work under some time pressure in the profession, but not to that extent. And so it was something that Prof. Diane Grayson raised with me a couple of years ago, and so we work within those parameters. But I actually think that it's something we must really push back against the profession with and say that this is a positive move, and that students need time to actually think and engage with the content. And when you don't allow that time, they actually can't show you what their ability is. So I thought I'd share that because it was easier to tell you than to type it.
Yes, no, that's perfect, and I agree. And in line with the 4th year moves, we always adjust at a 3rd year level. So this past June paper that students just wrote, I can already, we're still in the marking process. They only wrote on Monday, so that's on the to-do list after the conference. But we already seeing that exactly that thing of there's not as many students that leave the last couple of pages blank because they got rushed and they didn't manage to finish. And it's interesting because it's not just that they were able to finish, it's that they were less panicked when they had the time available, which we found in the past. Sometimes you can see from a student's script that they got nervous because they were worried about time, and then they spiraled. And I always tell students, if there's something you get stuck with in an assessment, panicking about it won't help you remember anything. It'll just cause you to forget what you already know. So managing your anxiety during an assessment is such a vital part of getting through it, that students need to learn to do before they sit there. You can't realize for the first time when you sit in front of your in the actual assessment venue that I'm not sure what this means, I'm not sure how quickly I can do this calculation, or that type of thing. So the additional time has definitely made a difference. So there's definitely, like I said, there's a lot of improvement already, but I do think there's still a lot of things that we can work on.
Thank you so much. And we have the very last comment from Dr. Vissen. He says he do like that you went to literature as source for formulating your approach to addressing feedback and assessment literacy. Thank you so much to the attendees, and thank you, Sandra, for the awesome, fantastic sessions. It's truly insightful. If there's no other questions, I do encourage all the attendees and participants to please go into the Padlet chat and just share and reflect a little bit on Sandra's sessions. Thank you so much, and have a lovely afternoon. We'll see you for the other session. Thanks, Sandra. Cheers.